and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson. Bud Elliott joining us here in just a little bit. Thanks for watching live on youtube.com/Cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like. Come and join us in the chat. Lots to get to. This is our College Football Playoff Semifinals preview show. We have been holding your hands all the way through this insane bowl season. We will have more bonanza for the rest of the New Year's Six and the January 2nd games. All that coming up in a little bit after we get through our CFP previews. Where matchups to watch, the big storylines, what we've got our eyes on, plus, of course, the best bets. And it's too bad that Mr. Gotta Have 8 Wins, Mr. Too Many Bowls, is not able to join us today, because I just want to take a second to celebrate an absolute banger of a bowl day that we had on Wednesday in college football. Duke takes care of business against UCF. That was a little bit sleepy, but then it is just an insane Liberty Bowl, an absolutely thrilling and doinkerific Holiday Bowl between Oregon and North Carolina. And then we also have Texas Tech, straight putting it on Ole Miss here in the nightcap, in the very, very nightcap. Before we dive into these CFP previews, Tom, what were some of your highlights or lowlights from yesterday's bowl action?
You mentioned UCF Duke was sleepy. I felt like Arkansas kind of lost connection if you're playing somebody online. Like their internet went out about some point in the fourth quarter, because it's like I think they just stopped playing because they thought the game was over. But I don't like to use bowl games as complete and total kind of like this is how good this conference actually is. But we were saying all year about how like the Big 12 might not have the elite teams that the SEC does, but from top to bottom, it's a better league. I think that was evident yesterday in 2 of those games. Kansas coming back and forcing 3 overtimes against Arkansas, and then Texas Tech just whooping up on. Remember that fraudulent top 10 team Ole Miss that everybody got mad at us about? What, they lose 5 in a row to finish the season now?
Yes. All right. Wi-Fi check. Sorry, do you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, We got you.
Boom. Look at that. All right. Marriott got their Wi-Fi working. This is a good thing here. I think it's fair to ask you if the SEC, I think we all agree, has been one of the worst SECs in our lifetime. I think it's probably the 3rd worst SEC year since the merger, or since they went to divisional play in 92. When they go 92? Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably the 3rd worst, I think. And there's 2 other years. I don't have them in front of me, but I did look this up when we had this argument a while ago. But Ole Miss, I think, is especially fraudulent. I mean, they beat a good Troy team, and that was the first game under Troy's new coach. They beat up on Georgia Tech when they were still under the old coach, before they kind of started carrying and playing hard this year. They got A&M when A&M was an absolute mess. Arkansas housed them, and that's clearly not a very good Arkansas team. They got Auburn when Auburn was really a mess. It was the first game that Cadillac coached, I think. Right?
October 15th. So we are sitting right there in the in the crosshairs for when that change went down.
Obviously, like LSU, that LSU Ole Miss game kind of fooled me as to what LSU's offense was. It made me think LSU's offense might be coming around and is kind of decent. And I think everything since has told us it's really not. They are one of the most fraudulent teams in the country to me this year.
That new contract, Lane, you getting it done? I mean, let's go ahead and let's dive into let's hit the Peach Bowl first, because it is number 1 Georgia, it's number 4 Ohio State. There's a lot of ways that I want to attack that. And my transition here is, if the SEC stinks, should Georgia be concerned? Did you just Georgia is excellent. Georgia has been excellent. And I say this like half kidding, but going into this game, is there any, where is your level of concern about Georgia, its path to get here? And specifically, and this is the actual matchup angle that I wanted to discuss, is Georgia's secondary ready for CJ Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and this passing attack? Because the Oregon offense that Georgia absolutely choked the life out of hadn't really found its footing yet. Oregon finishes the season as one of the, better offenses in the country, top 10, top 15, depending on what statistic that you use. Tennessee, one of the best passing attacks in the country. They choked the life out of that. Hendon Hooker's, no passes. That the whole Heupel offense is supposed to hit big plays. No pass plays greater than 28 yards in that game. The one interception time he threw it in the end zone was picked off by Keely Ringo. So those are a couple data points that a Georgia fan looks at and says, okay, we're good to go. But the rest of the schedule that Georgia has faced is nothing close to what they're going to face against the Buckeyes. So as we start to peel back the layers of this Peach Bowl matchup between Georgia and Ohio State, I want to ask, do you think this Georgia defense is ready for what's coming with this Ohio State passing attack?
I do. It's going back to the original point. Georgia's still the best team in the country. The SEC is not very good, but Georgia's still the best team in the country. This is a more difficult matchup than I think they would probably like. If you're Georgia and you're being honest, you'd have probably preferred TCU to Ohio State. And I don't think,
100%.
Yeah. You wouldn't say it publicly, but everybody knows that's the case. And so Ohio State is a tough matchup for the Bulldogs because, as you said, offensively, this is a team with a whole hell of a lot. But what I come back to when I try to break this game down and I try to figure it out, Ohio State is not nearly as bad as I feel like the world has wanted to pretend since it lost to Michigan. It just lost to a very good team. But I go back to that game and I go back to last season, both the Michigan loss and the Oregon loss. And there's CJ Stroud is an incredible quarterback when things go as planned. When his read is there, when his pocket is clean, there's probably isn't a better quarterback in the country as far as delivering the ball on time, delivering the ball where it's supposed to be, and delivering the ball to the right receiver. But when he gets under pressure, the one thing about Stroud that is a concern that I know NFL scouts have is when things go off script, like you see, like Bryce Young at Alabama, they worry about his size and his frame and maybe his ability to withstand, the physical play of the NFL. But when the play breaks down, Bryce Young can scramble around and make things happen. He does not panic. CJ Stroud, when he is pressured, panics. If it's not there where it's supposed to be and things are going off script, he struggles mightily. We saw it against Oregon and we saw it against Michigan twice. This is a Georgia team that defensively on the season, if you look at their overall numbers, they don't get a ton of pressure compared to what you would think they would be at with the talent they have. They don't blitz a lot. They kind of just, they bring their 3 or 4 guys, and then if they get it, they get it. But this is also defense too, situationally, as I've talked about with this team in recent weeks, they've taken games off. Let's be honest. They have cruised against some opponents knowing that they were going to win easily. But when it came to their big games and they stepped it up, the defense gets more pressure. So for me, in this game, we could talk about Stroud. We could talk about the receivers. We should also probably talk about Trevion Henderson not playing. But for me, Ohio State's offensive line is the most important unit in this game because if they can't hold up against that Georgia front, we've seen what happens to Ohio State's offense when they're not blocking. It goes to crap really quick.
I think to Tom's point, just specifically here, Ohio State's tackles are very good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both those guys will be playing in the NFL. We've talked about this for about a month or two now, how Ohio State probably needs to land 2 tackles in the transfer portal because both their kids have a pretty good shot of going pro. Ohio State on the interior, though, is not as good. And that is where Georgia is very good defensively this year. In fact, I don't know how many people in the chat can name Georgia's edge rushers. You got Beal, you got Jones Jr., Marvin Jones, obviously. But ultimately, you have got to get Jalen Carter blocked. And Jalen Carter is probably the best defensive player in the country, with all due respect to Will Anderson. And I don't know how well Ohio State will do that. If Ohio State devotes extra resources to that, I'm interested to see some of Georgia's blitz packages, right? I'm not really sure how much edge pressure Georgia can get without blitzing. Now, against Tennessee, they brought a lot of blitzes, and they said, hey, we'll see if you can hold up on the back end. That game kind of game scripted as well, extremely well to Georgia, and I think some of the weather stuff probably helped, but Tennessee is not anywhere near as good as Georgia is, in my opinion. So I'm interested to see how well Ohio State can hold up on the interior against Jalen Carter, and then how many extra rushers that Georgia's defense will have to bring to get pressure. Because Tom is totally right. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL who play on script extremely well and don't play well when they're off script. And That's not like that's a knock on Stroud, but it's not a one that's going to prohibit him from going to the league. Not that we care about going to the league in a preview of the title game. Like it's not disqualifying for him to win this ball game or to play well, but it is something that Georgia's that's top of mind for them. Like, you got to get this guy off script. He's not very good throwing on the run. He's not really that much of a scrambler. He seems to want to hang out in the pocket. We got to make that pocket uncomfortable. This is the game where I think they really miss Jackson, honestly, because I don't see anybody on Ohio State's offense who is that Jameson Williams type, who's that dude who's the absolute burner that scares you. Like Harrison Jr. is fast for his size, right? And Egbuka is a nice after the catch guy. Who is your dude who's like, oh, damn it. Like if he's on a safety, we are cooked. I don't know that Ohio State has that guy right now. And maybe that makes you, if you're Georgia's defense, you're a little bit less scared.
Yeah. And like going back to the Stroud thing, like no quarterback likes being under pressure, but most of them, they would prefer it coming from the outside because at least then they could step up in the pocket if there's room there. But if Jalen Carter is collapsing that from the middle, that's what quarterbacks hate the most because then there's no escape route.
Yeah, the ability to see over the middle for those sweet, sweet Ohio State crossing routes when you've got somebody like Egbuka moving across the field. If all of a sudden 88's in your face, you're not going to be able to get a clean pocket. You're not going to be able to dump that off. I'm fascinated because to me, when I think about Ohio State's offense, and I did a lot of comparing it to Tennessee in some of my thoughts about this game, it is a lot more on some of the shorter passing game than what Tennessee has and trying to let those guys go and make some plays. If Georgia does decide to bring pressure, maybe you've got a chance to hit some explosives that way. But you mentioned a great point. None of it comes together at all if you're getting blown up in the middle. And that's one of those things where if we see it happen early, then, I mean, night. Like we'll be ringing in the new year. We might fire up the instant reaction pod before the final gun of the game. If we start to see Ohio State unable to block the interior pressure from Georgia's defensive front. All right. What about on the other side? Because we did not spend a lot of time. We acknowledge that Ohio State has a very, very good defense and it's a very, very talented defense, but I don't think we spent a lot of time either picking apart with criticism or holding up and celebrating Ohio State's defense as a truly elite unit. What does that matchup look like as they go up against Georgia, a team who offensively has been very, very productive and very successful this season? It's often a little unique. Honestly, it's probably a strength of how versatile they are, the different ways that they use their running backs and the tight ends. We spent a lot of time looking at the wide receiver position, and yet they still were able to get a whole bunch of yards, be very successful, and put up a whole bunch of points. What does that matchup look like when the Bulldogs have the ball going up against Ohio State?
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, or the thing I'm going to be looking for early, is what happened in the Michigan game with them getting burned so many times, bringing all that pressure. Does that cause them to be a bit more conservative in this game? And should they be more conservative defensively in this game? Because if you look at Georgia offensively, outside of Bowers, what is there in the passing game that you're really concerned about beating you deep? Like they haven't really shown the ability, whether it's at receiver or at quarterback, to do that to teams consistently. So if I'm Ohio State, I think if I'm Jim Knowles, I'm still going to be aggressive as hell because I do have a good defense and I do have a good pass rush. And if I'm going to beat this team, I'm probably going to need to force some turnovers and I'm probably going to have to force the issue and put Stetson Bennett in the same situation that Georgia's going to be trying to put CJ Stroud in, where I think Bennett is better when things go off script, but I also think Bennett is capable of doing really dumb things when things go off script and making throws that he should not make. So it's going to be interesting to see if Ohio State is as aggressive defensively. They have the same issues in Georgia in that you do worry about their secondary when they have to cover for a while. You do feel like that is the weakness of the defense, but I have a little more faith in their defensive backs against Georgia's receiving core than I do in Georgia's defensive backs against Ohio State. So I do think that is somewhat of an equalizer in this matchup.
Agree with Tom on that. I will say Georgia appears to be probably the healthiest that they've been all year at the receiver position. So I'm excited to see that. We go back to last year, and last year doesn't really count as much as this year's sample set does. But, last year, one of the concerns with Stetson was his downfield accuracy, right? And I think and look, it's been better this year. ultimately, if you play that style, and I think you probably should, there is some chance that he doesn't connect on those deep balls, much like Hendon Hooker did not connect on those deep balls against Georgia earlier this year because they had some guys open and he missed them. And they didn't have him open that often. But I think if you're Ohio State, you have to keep playing that hyper-aggressive style. To me, Georgia does a lot of really interesting stuff schematically with their two tight end looks. Ohio State, can you play nickel against that? If not, you probably are going to have a lot of situations where you're having to match up with Bowers or Washington with a linebacker. I mean, that's really tough. How does Ohio State handle some of these compressed sets that they're going to throw at you? Monken does a really nice job with these chess pieces. I think you're going to see both these guys in the NFL probably drafted pretty highly, to be honest. They're really special athletes and they're big dudes. Up front, Georgia is really good. They lost McClendon. I assume he's going to play. Maybe doesn't. Mims stepped in and was just as good. Broderick Jones at left tackle is really good. They're pretty damn good on the interior. They don't necessarily have that first round back, but they got a lot of backs that'll hit you pretty well. And it kind of comes down how many points do you think that Georgia needs to win this ball game, right? I mean, if you give Georgia 35, you feel really good, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the spread right now is 62. So, yeah, or excuse me, the over under 62. I don't know that Ohio State is that athletic defensively.
Ooh,
but
JT Tuimoloau is phenomenal.
Yeah,
and that's when I think about Ohio State's best win this season, it was in Happy Valley against Penn State, and JTT was a monster. He just single-handedly took that game over. He scored touchdowns himself. He had fumble recovery, interception. He was just all over the field doing everything. And can Tuimoloau keep up with Brock Bowers? I don't know. I'm not going to be able to match that up specifically, but
no, he cannot. I guarantee
that's a freak. I was thinking about Jack Sawyer. I was thinking about
more of an edge guy, though. You know what I'm saying?
He's more of an edge, 100%. He's a defensive end.
Who's their Deron Payne? Who's their Christian Wilkins or Dexter Lawrence or who's their Jalen Carter? Just to use an example from this game, is who makes Brock who makes the quarterback uncomfortable from the inside? We think Jalen could probably do to Stroud. I don't know.
Nobody without blitzing.
Yeah, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe you just bring it and they don't connect, and that certainly happens. It's a single game sample set, right? For 54 plays, Ohio State's defense played pretty damn well against Michigan, and for 5 extremely damaging plays, they did not. It's entirely possible that Ohio State doesn't give up quite as many explosives in this game and is able to shut Georgia down. I don't think they will, but it's very possible.
What about we've been on this one for a little bit. I want to make sure we hit the Fiesta Bowl as well. You mentioned the total. You mentioned the spread. What do we like? What's our best bet?
I'm Georgia and the under. I think that the Ohio State's offense, it goes back. The last 3 games I've seen it against defenses that can do this to it, it has struggled. And until I see it able to overcome these kind of things, I just don't know how many points the Buckeyes are going to be able to score here. I think Georgia, I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I do see a situation where in the fourth quarter, maybe the dam kind of bursts a little bit and Georgia's able to pull away, but I don't think it's going to be high scoring. I don't think it's going to be a tennis match. And I think that plays to Georgia's benefit because while I think that the Bulldogs can score a lot of points, I think we've also seen this is a team that we've seen it plenty of times. Once it gets a comfortable lead, it has absolutely no problem just kind of squatting on it. And with another game left to play afterwards, Georgia will have all the reason in the world to squat on it if it has to. So I like Georgia in the under, but I like the spread more than the total.
I kind of like the total more. I don't think I'm going to bet the actual the spread. I may play some first quarter or some alt stuff if I see it out there. Maybe they'll post that closer to game time. But I will probably play a little on under 62.5, under 63 type numbers. I could see a game where it's 28-24 type thing. That's possible.
I've game scripted this out over. I think I think that Georgia establishes an advantage early. And I can visualize CJ Stroud and these wide receivers tacking on a couple late touchdowns when the game is on the verge of being garbage time, but they're just going to continue to try to hit something fast. Maybe you start to get a little bit of softer coverage. I am 100% probably influenced and biased by what we saw in the SEC championship game, but Kirby doesn't want to put too much on tape. Once he knows the game is won, they might go a little bit vanilla. And so that's where I could see just like Ryan Day, Ohio State, this is a group whose pride is hurt, right? I mean, this is like devastation. Vibes were bad. There were 6 days where things were horrendous. Then Utah takes down USC, and all of a sudden you've got a second chance at this. I do think they are outmatched. I think Georgia is the much better team. I would take Georgia. I would lay the points, but I think that there's like almost an aesthetics play where even if the game is in hand, you're going to see Ohio State continue to try to hit some big plays. And that's why I just think the talent level of our 2 1,000-yard wide receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Buka, is just going to lead to some touchdowns that could take us over the total. So if it's under 63, I lean more over with the idea that we get kind of some panic scores as we get late in the game, in a game that Georgia probably officially has in hand.
It also it's very correlated with who gets out first. Like you said,
yes.
Georgia can squat on it, but if you like over, you probably like something like Ohio State first quarter money line, just to throw that out there, right? The Buckeyes having the lead, first. Those things would make some sense to me. Also, I think you need to properly figure out, and I don't really have a great feel on this, which is why I'm not going heavy on this. What kind of tempo is Georgia can play with? Because Georgia occasionally will break out the tempo. We think of Ohio State as the tempo team because they throw the ball around a lot, but Georgia likes to stay in their 12 personnel and play some tempo. So I'm curious how that goes. This is going to be fun. I really this is the game, right, that we're excited to watch. And this may be for the national title. I still have Ohio State rated higher than Michigan. So, I mean, this is kind of to me, this is kind of the national title game.
And we'll already know the result of TCU Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to talk about some interesting energy in the atmosphere on New Year's Eve, let Michigan beat TCU and let Ohio State be up 10-0 in the first quarter, and just feel it. Just feel it all over the college football world. That would be an incredible stuff. All right. We've been asking, and you have been delivering. So why don't you do me a favor? We got a lot of people watching. I can tell a bunch of y'all are off work. We're busting our asses. We're working every single day this week, but a lot of y'all are off work, and I can tell because you're all hanging out watching. So everybody watching, do me a favor, smash that like button, because we're going to give out some 30-day Paramount Plus free trials. And Tom,
yes,
our pre-show meeting, we came up with a number.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to let the people know how many and why that many Paramount Plus 30-day free trials we're about to give out?
Yeah, I was thinking that in honor of the Coach K curse and North Carolina blowing its Holiday Bowl lead late to Oregon last night, we could honor the greatest Tar Heel of all time, Michael Jordan, and give away 23 Paramount Plus subscriptions. So put your Twitter handles in the chat, follow Cover 3 on Twitter, make sure you're following us, and we will choose 23 of you to get a free 30-day trial to Paramount Plus.
Tar Heel Tears means more Top Gun for you. 23 Paramount Plus 30-day free trials. Smash that like button. Drop your Twitter handles in the chat. Make sure you're following the Cover 3 podcast. Again, we appreciate it in advance. Well, coming up on the other side, we're going to turn our attention to the Fiesta Bowl between TCU and Michigan, plus our Bonanza best bets for the rest of the games on New Year's Eve and January 2nd. Next.
Meanwhile, on Paramount Mountain.
All right, let's do this roll call. It's freezing up here. Blase, where you at, Blase?
It's Blaze.
Okay, so that's how it's gonna be.
Blaze?
Y'all need to say your name right. B. Louie.
Do you mean blue?
Okay. You wanna go to war? You prefer not to go to war? Me too. Ridiculous. Hey, Ron.
Here, Coach.
Thank you. Where's Bumbly Bay at? Is Bumbly Bay up in here?
Bumbly Bay.
Give me some speed. Y'all watch Blaze?
No.
I'm down with Blaze. We're all about it, rocking and rolling. All right, so we will be out in the Fiesta Bowl in Arizona, and that's where we will find TCU and Michigan. Michigan's second straight appearance in the college football playoff. TCU, first time ever showing up in the college football playoff. So as we're breaking this game down, Bud, what really stands out to you? You can take either side, but from the matchup perspective, what do you have your eyes on? What do you think is the most interesting in the Fiesta Bowl?
Yeah, so I want to start with Michigan's offense and TCU's defense. I have a ton of respect for Joe Gillespie, the coordinator of TCU. I thought it was a really good hire by Sonny Dykes. And if you talk to anybody who coaches in the American, they like to thank Coach Dykes for removing Joe Gillespie as Tulsa's defensive coordinator and bringing him to Fort Worth because he's a really good DC. They run, if they were a pitcher in baseball, you would say they throw a lot of off speed, a lot of junk, and some different stuff that if you haven't faced it can kind of mess you up, right? If you look at what they did to Texas, I mean, they don't have a lot of special players on this TCU defense. They're well coached. They play together well. I mean, their nose guard's a true freshman, right? Who's played pretty well this year. One of their best corners is a kid in Newton they got from Louisiana Monroe. But they did a nice job of creating sort of like falsities or falsehoods in Texas's blocking scheme. And all of a sudden, Texas thought they had a lane, and then, boom, linebacker is coming free. I don't know how well that's going to work against Michigan because I think Michigan is probably the best offensive line that they have seen all year, and maybe the best offensive line they do see all year, unless they beat Michigan and they go play Georgia, and Georgia might be as good or better. Michigan is really well coached up front. I am curious as to how much TCU can confuse Michigan. Michigan center Oluwatimi, who they got as a transfer from UVA, is a really good player, and I think almost everybody on this line for Michigan is going to get drafted. So can you spit on, like, to stay with the baseball forever, can you spit on this stuff that's just falling out of the strike zone and then force TCU to kind of come, throw you pitches inside the strike zone? Can you get it blocked out enough up front? Because if you don't have confusion up front, I think Michigan can block TCU. And then that's going to go into the part of the discussion here where, okay, if one-on-one we're not able to confuse them and they're able to move us physically, can we outnumber them? And if so, what is that going to do to J.J. McCarthy? Can McCarthy play well enough, especially from the pocket? Like, can we make him play quarterback? Because this playoff doesn't feature a lot of stud quarterbacks. McCarthy might turn into one. Stroud's probably the best one you have.
Yeah.
I guess Stetson could get drafted, actually, which is possible. I mean, maybe like back half of the round.
Oh, no, I've already got him logged as a governor or senator.
No.
Duggan's a one-read guy
for the Patriots next week.
McCarthy has enough bad games, or just not bad games, just like games. It's like, okay, like is that guy going to carry you to a national title? Can he carry you to a playoff win? If TCU can do enough, and I think it's possible they actually can, by the way, because Edwards is not the same type of like vision runner as Corum was. So, like maybe they can get him seeing ghosts. Maybe they get him to bounce the ball a little earlier than Blake Corum would and not stay on his initial track. Maybe you get Michigan behind the chains a little bit. You're able to take them off their play action game some, and you force McCarthy to beat you. I think TCU on the outside can hold up against these guys. I'm just not sure if they can create enough confusion in Michigan's blocking scheme in the run game. Like, that's what I want to watch early. Is TCU have runners coming free, not running backs, runners on the defensive side coming free for these tackle for loss. Correct. Yeah. Exactly. Because if Michigan's not confused, it's all right, man. Your breaking stuff ain't working today. You're having to throw 88. I'm gonna hit that shit out of the park. I'm gonna hit that out of the park. Excuse me.
I'm with like TCU's defense. It is a good defense. The problem is when you get to this point, to this place, the college football playoff, the other three teams have elite defenses, and a good defense usually isn't. We've seen it in times like this. When you get to the playoff, the good defense is usually ends up hurting you or killing you in the end because you don't get enough stops once you face another elite team. And I do think it'll be interesting because I have enough respect for the Horned Frogs defense to think that they can give Michigan some trouble. Problem is, once Michigan figures it out, will they have a counter? Will they be able to overpower that? Because like you said, but that's the best offensive line in the country. It's won the Joe Moore Award 2 years in a row. All 5 of those guys will probably be in the NFL. We've seen it against the Ohio State defensive front. If it was able to hold up against them, I have a feeling it will be able to hold up against TCU, because it's not like Ohio State's just playing vanilla defenses. They were bringing all sorts of crazy blitzes against them in that game, and they just really couldn't get home often enough to have enough of an impact, and they got beat over the top doing it. The question is, offensively, can TCU move the ball enough against this Michigan defense to score? I think they can. I think they will have more success than most teams have had this season. Will they have enough? I don't know, because I look at this matchup. First of all, TCU, this is just a fun stat. TCU has played in 6 one-score games this year. It's gone 5-1 in them. Obviously, the one loss was the Big 12 championship. The other 3 teams in this playoff combined have played 3 one-score games. Michigan's played 2. Georgia's played 1. Ohio State hasn't played in any. So TCU's been in more of them than any of these other teams combined. So that you could look at that as a sign of weakness, as in this team's not good enough because it's not able to pull away from others. But you can also look at the positive and say, well, this team also knows how to handle adversity. So if they jump out to a lead here and Michigan finds itself in trouble, a position that Michigan has not been in at any point this season, how does J.J. McCarthy react to that when he's in a situation out there where it's like, okay, kid, it's on you. You need to lead us on a touchdown drive right the hell now. They haven't been in a whole lot of those. They had a couple of them at the end of that Illinois game, and they did well. They drove down the field. They got the game-winning field goal with the help of an official. And then, they ended up winning the game. But they haven't really faced a ton of adversity. So I think that is going to be an interesting thing to watch in this one. But at the same time, I come back, and I think Michigan, in a lot of ways, stylistically and philosophically, is similar to the Kansas State team that gave TCU so much trouble during the regular season, because TCU beat the Wildcats in the regular season, but they got them down to their 3rd-string quarterback before they were able to do so. Kansas State then comes back at full strength, beats them in the Big 12 championship. Michigan is a better team than Kansas State. It has more talent. It has a better offensive line. It has a better defense. So I look at those 2 games and I see how much TCU struggled in them, and it's hard for me to think the Horned Frogs can win this game. So I have to go Michigan here. I think this is good. I think the Wolverines are going to win this game, because I think Georgia's the best team in the country. I think Michigan's the 2nd best team in the country, and I think we are destined for a Georgia-Michigan playoff rematch.
You know who kind of reminds me a little bit of TCU in the Big Ten? Like, not as talented and not as good,
Who?
but Maryland.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're both good. Like, they're both sneakily good at corner. They don't have huge difference makers on the defensive interior. They do a lot with schematic confusion. Offensively, like, I don't think anybody thinks that Duggan or Talia are big time NFL guys. They do have a lot of weapons on the outside. Offensive line wise, they're okay. They're not great necessarily. It's a lot of kind of native spread stuff. And Maryland actually gave Michigan a decent bit of trouble in that ball game, And I mean, it's because I totally agree with Tom. Like, I was trying to think, or what's the flip on this? Like who has Michigan played that is similar to TCU? Nobody really runs that 3-3-5 stack that Gillespie wants to run in the Big Ten. So that it may take them a minute or two to see. And like, TCU's also kind of changed how they've played it throughout the year. Like, the way they played it against Kansas State and the way they played it against Texas is not the same stuff they were playing, in against Oklahoma State necessarily. So I don't know, like, maybe this starts kind of slow. I could see. I'm really curious to see how much play action early Michigan tries to do with JJ. Like, and I think if you could trust him enough that he'd only pull the trigger if it's really there, you do it a lot. Because you got to think TCU is going to be loading up against the run, because you cannot get game scripted out of this thing. I do not think TCU has a real ability to come from behind here, but they can play with the lead, because TCU will go for the explosive kill shot and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or does Michigan just say, hey, like, we're fine grinding this out. We're going to just run the ball 55 times and throw it 17 times. And, like, we're confident when the dust settles, we will win the ball game.
And another thing to keep an eye on too, like, all year, Michigan's been incredible in the second half of games. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this game is kind of close for the first half. They get to the locker room at halftime. Michigan makes the adjustments it's been making all season long, and then just kind of blows the doors off them in the second half.
And TCU has 2, which is I think both these teams are really well coached. Now, part of that is certain quarterbacks maybe got hurt during the game.
Oh, come on.
Oh, man.
So in the Big 12 championship game, Kansas State sent a ton of pressure. They were like getting after Max Duggan. Does Michigan need to? Does Michigan have the personnel? The game is that something that Michigan's coaches are going to be able to maybe take a lesson from and try to apply to their approach to try to slow Max Duggan in this offense?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see Michigan a little more active as far as that's concerned, because that's one thing. Like defensively, they've still been very good. But what they've been best at is just not letting you finish drives, because they lost Aiden Hutchinson, they lost Ajabo from last year's team, and the pass rush, while it has been admirable, has not been nearly to the same level of the Michigan team we saw last year. But where they have been much better is, like I said, when teams get into scoring range, they get shut down. Like if you're happy at some point just to get away with a field goal, because that seems to really be the only thing Michigan's willing to allow at that point. So that, I think, is something I don't know if you're going to see them bring a ton of blitzes, because I think that's just not really what they do. They blitz some, but maybe. I mean,
they've got good defensive linemen who will get sacks and tackles for loss because they're winning battles against the offensive line. But schematically, it doesn't seem like they're dialing up a bunch of pressure as intentionally as maybe you could.
Yeah, from what I've seen of Minter, I think that he's going to be more concerned about TCU's explosive play potential, and he's going to look to limit that. I mean, that's what he did against Ohio State. It's what he did against Penn State. I think that's probably what they end up doing in this game. Try to make TCU hit a bunch of singles instead of home runs. That's
what I think too. I mean, look, Duggan is a player I love watching, but he's a very college-y quarterback, right? I mean, like he's not somebody who's good at going through progressions at all. Like they of all the quarterbacks in this playoff, he's the guy you have to scheme it up for the most, probably. And you could probably argue that Michigan should scheme it up more, like for McCarthy a little more than they do. They seem to throw a lot of offense on him, although they don't actually throw the ball that often. So maybe that's their limiting factor there. But Michigan runs a very NFL style defense. Morris, I think up front, is capable of getting pressure for them. I think Mozzie Smith should do a good job for them in terms of compressing the pocket. And it wouldn't shock me if they blitz him some, because like Saints drill, their nickel guy is actually a pretty damn good cover dude. The number of screens that TCU runs, though, is interesting to me. And I wonder if they're going to be a little hesitant to blitz as much, because TCU is so big play reliant. If you blitz that much, as you saw Michigan's offense do against Ohio State's defense, there is a chance that you pop these big plays. TCU is not a team that is a high success rate team. They do not put drives together very well at all. I'm going to ask them to play left-handed, and left-handed for them is sustaining drives.
And shout out to the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Matt and Gary, they're the absolute best in that space. So I'm not going to do a whole trivia time, but this is a question. 16 College Football Playoff Semifinals have been held since the format was introduced. Do you know how many have been decided by single digits?
Oh, 5 at most.
But you got to guess?
3.
Yeah, okay.
13 of 16 College Football Playoff Semifinals have been decided by 10 points or more, and 9 of them have been decided by 20 points or more. These games are not that close. It's fascinating. And so and by the way, favorites in the college football playoff in the last 5 years, 7-3 against the spread, 9-1 straight up.
You almost get the sense that with so many blowouts in the semis, you really only need 2 teams in a playoff.
So with that as context, or maybe you're going against it, best bets for the Fiesta Bowl. What do we like? Tom, you already said you think Michigan wins. Probably take Michigan to cover.
Yeah, I like TCU. TCU is a very good team. TCU deserves to be here, but we make no bones of the fact that of the 4 teams in this playoff, TCU is I hate using the word weakest in this situation, but it is the weakest of the 4. I think if either of these 2 games have blowout potential, this is the one with the biggest blowout potential. So I'm taking Michigan.
Just from a pure power rating standpoint, Michigan A game is probably a 30, right? TCU's A game is probably still like a 22, 23, maybe a 24. So I think if you assume you get the A game for both, I think you got to take Michigan.
Total?
Over. I think
Over?
Michigan. I don't think Michigan gets stopped very often.
Michigan's been so like ruthlessly efficient all year. They're just mean about it. I've just got images of like Olu Oluwatimi getting to the second level and just like putting a TCU linebacker into the ground. I'm Michigan.
I'm not playing anything on the total, but if I had to, I'd probably play under. Yeah. I mean, just game script wise, if you like Michigan, I think you assume that they don't get down early. They're able to run the ball, lean on it late. They'll play slow. Takes away some of the play action stuff that TCU wants to do. I tend to lean under.
Lean under there. All right. Keeping things going with, we know you got those bowl pools, and we know that you want to have action on games besides just the college football playoff semifinals. So as we continue our Bowl-nanza, we look at the Sugar Bowl, which an 11 a.m. local kick in New Orleans. Yuck. Sugar Bowl should always be at night. Alabama, Kansas State. Alabama favored by 6.5. Bryce Young playing, Will Anderson playing. Over under 56. What's our best bet for this game?
Did you guys they had the Sugar Bowl press conference yesterday? People were asking Bill O'Brien questions about how much he's enjoyed his time as the offensive coordinator at Alabama.
Past tense.
They weren't saying so. They were saying it so this is your last game as the offensive coordinator. How have you enjoyed your time? Kansas State.
The thing is, Saban does not let his coordinators or assistants talk on the record. I mean, some of these guys will text, but you can't really, you can't quote them on the record, and there's no press conferences. So these guys have basically what are you asking? Hey, he's not going to trash whatever's going on there internally on the way out. We're going to hey, how hurt was Bryce really down the stretch? Probably not going to answer that. It's a weird situation to be in for these guys, that especially if you get somebody who's leaving. Yeah, but for the bowls, Saban cannot tell the coordinators don't talk. That's actually mandated by the bowls. Same as the open locker rooms after the game, right? It's you never get that in most college atmospheres. In the bowls and the playoff, you do. I think you got to lay this. If these guys are playing, you got to assume they're going to play hard. Power ratings wise, this is definitely bigger than 7, assuming these guys play the whole time.
So that's the thing. I don't think they're going to play the whole time. I think they're going to play a little bit, and then we'll find them on the sidelines for a lot of the game. And I also think Kansas State, they're going to come out trying to beat Alabama in this one.
If you got them big insurance policies, which is the assumption, not the knowledge, but the assumption that I'm working on, that's the only way I'd play in this game is if I was Bryce Young, is if you wrote me some insane insurance policy for one game, right? Do you think you probably got it for the full game? But I think Tom brings up an interesting angle. Would you rather bet first quarter or first half here if you think they're only going to play some?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Kansas State's going to come out here on fire. I'm going to lay it with Alabama.
Is it Martinez? Because if I'm betting Bama, I want Martinez. He's not as good as Howard.
Right. Agree.
I'm saying, because if you're Kansas State, wouldn't you love to finish your year and be able to say, yeah, we beat TCU and we beat Alabama. So we beat a playoff team and we beat the premier program in the country. So maybe we're not, maybe we're the Big 12 powerhouse going forward.
I do think we have to look at Kansas State as when the Big 12 is all realigned. It's
a very good team. Very good program.
You got to go into them and just, no matter what has happened in terms of who's come, who's left, who's graduated, who's moved on, I will assume it's a top 5 team. We can split hairs based on what's going on with everybody else, but this has been a very, very impressive. Really, from the middle of last season all the way through this season, Chris Kleiman's done a fantastic job with that program. I think they are set up for success moving forward. Now, Tom, I believe you mentioned that we are almost done with bad weather. You know, I need it to be colder and windier in Nashville, Tennessee than it's going to be when Iowa and Kentucky play. I need it to be like Iowa City, late October, dark by 3 p.m. kind of weather. I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be
my heart.
It's not going to be that warm, but it's definitely not going to be as cold as it could be. Iowa and Kentucky. Iowa favored by 2. Over under of 31.
Under.
You got to.
I mean,
Also,
Kentucky doesn't have Will Levis. It doesn't have its 2 leading rushers. Iowa doesn't have either of its top 2 quarterbacks. Like, these offenses stink with the starters. What are they going to be with their 3rd and 4th stringers?
I was also thinking about Kentucky's offensive line against Iowa's defensive front.
Yeah, it's going to be. This game is going to be
dramatic.
terrible.
Yeah.
Over if I have to.
No, don't do it. You're disgusting. You are disgusting.
Look, so kind of the same logic for Army Navy applies here, even though but even more in my favor because these offenses don't know each other all that well. They just happen to know that they suck. So when you have a spread that is this close and a really low total, if the game is actually competitive, overtime is a lot more likely than normal, and it has to be factored into the handicap. 13-13, 17-17, right? Like 10-10, 14-14. When you have a spread of 2 or 3 and a total this low, those are finals at the end of regulation are going to come up an awful lot of time because they're just not – if a close game with this low of a total, like what possible scores can you have? I mean, safeties can screw it up, certainly if you get the safeties. These teams are not going to go for 2 a lot, given how bad their offenses are. I think you got to factor that in. If you got a local or if you got somebody that thinks they're pretty smart, maybe they'll give you a little overtime prop on this. I consider throwing something at big odds there.
What, like a 90-minute plus extra time play where it's like?
Well, like in Super Bowl, you can bet will the game go to overtime? And a lot of books will hang that.
Okay. Not that we'll be able to hit under, but it won't penalize me if we go to overtime, which
right.
Thoughts and prayers to anybody who took the live under in the Liberty Bowl. That game was over.
We don't know anybody who did that, right?
Arkansas was going to win that game by 15 points. It's not a fumble. The ground.
It's not a fumble.
It's not a fumble.
All right.
84.5. I had it. 84.5. Cruising.
I will
Arkansas
say,
was like,
I get the logic for the live bet. And I don't necessarily disagree with it, but Arkansas wasn't stopping Kansas except when Kansas just threw ridiculous picks deep in Arkansas territory 2 or 3 times in the first half. So I don't know. I like second half over. Clearly that was not the right side.
They were stopping them on 1st and 2nd down. It was allowing Kansas to convert every single 3rd and 4th down that they took a crack at that really hurt them.
This is fair.
Well,
also,
what was the final score after 60 minutes? It was the right play. The under 84.5 was the right play. Just because you got lucky with the overtime, don't go telling me I made the wrong play.
All right. Remember, January 1st is a Sunday. That will be an NFL day. College football returns into the spotlight on Monday, January 2nd. It begins at noon Eastern time with the ReliaQuest Bowl. ReliaQuest for all of your corporate security software needs. ReliaQuest. It's Mississippi State and Illinois. It's a lot going on here, obviously. Mississippi State. We've seen a lot of very cool tributes to Mike Leach from other teams all across the country. Texas Tech, took a delay of game in the air raid formation for their first offensive play. Lane Kiffin, of course, Ole Miss, he declined it. There was a helmet decal for Ole Miss. A lot of helmet decals, some shirts that we've seen. But this is the actual Mississippi State football team that Mike Leach was the head coach of when they won the Egg Bowl in the final game of the regular season. They are playing in this game. Zach Arnett is the head coach, not just for the bowl game, but moving forward for 2023 and beyond. And Mississippi State is favored by 1. I have no idea how to make a best bet or handicap this game because of everything that's going on.
Illinois. There's your idea.
All right.
That's all.
So I'm really glad we have Tom on this episode, although I really should say, Tom's been on every episode, so he's been carrying the load for me here on bowl games. Who do we care is out for Illinois? I'm they got a couple guys out who definitely matter, right?
Witherspoon is out. Sidney Brown is out. Those are important. Chase Brown is out, which I think you're much happier if he plays, but I'm not really worried about Illinois being able to run the ball with or without Chase Brown. Like, Chase Brown's a very good running back, but he's not this isn't an explosive rushing offense to begin with. I feel like it's mostly kind of a successful play rushing attack. You know what I mean? So I don't know how big of an impact that has. I don't know. It's like, how do you handicap a team whose coach died?
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah, I will say that they got a couple dudes to come. I was looking at the Mississippi State stuff earlier. A couple of their guys who everybody thought was going to opt out decided to come back and play on the defensive side of the ball. But Ra Thomas is already transferred to Georgia, so he ain't playing. That's a pretty big thing for them, right? I don't know. I'm curious on that.
I
will say, we started the show talking about how the middle of the SEC is kind of, Chip before the show started said the SEC stands for Southeastern Cheeks.
That's true.
If we're going to stick to that, Illinois,
nothing but fade in the SEC from here on out. Everything that I've seen.
It's a clown conference, just
Southeastern Cheeks
poverty conference.
Is Quan Martin playing?
I believe so. I think so far the only opt-outs are Sidney Brown, Devon Witherspoon, and Chase Brown.
And Luke Ford?
He is
not going to play.
Not playing, but he's a blocking tight end. I'm not that concerned about it.
He's actually studying for his insurance exam right now. He's working on a Series 6. He's going to be out there making the deals. I mean, he's 27, right?
Luke Ford?
Yeah, isn't Luke Ford been in college football for 7 years?
Didn't he transfer from Georgia and the NCAA screwed him on a waiver that definitely should have been granted?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
the 100-mile rule, because his grandfather lived 103 miles away from campus instead of 100. So nope, no waiver for you. Remember those days?
No, thank goodness we got the one-time transfer rule. All right, the New Year's Six rolls on with the Cotton Bowl between Tulane and USC. USC favored by 2 points. Over under of 62. My, oh my, the vibes for the Wave are fantastic. Michael Pratt staying. Transfer portal additions coming in for 2023. Willie Fritz, you got a championship squad that you are leading into the Cotton Bowl against a program like USC. I bet Tulane's fans are going to be able to roll deep here and create quite a special environment for that program. So USC, who was sitting in the number 4 spot at kickoff for their conference championship game the last time they were out, does USC want to be here? Kind of feels like the operative beginning of me trying to predict whether USC is going to win this game and cover this number.
I do, simply because if you're USC and you just, the way that your regular season ended, you cost yourself a playoff berth. Do you really want to add losing to Tulane to your resume? In the Cotton Bowl, I feel like you still want, especially for Lincoln Riley, this is a program that is trying to go into 2023 as a national title contender, is very active in the portal, is trying to sell itself. I don't think losing to Tulane helps the sell. That said, take the over because nobody's getting any stops, and maybe that's what Lincoln Riley sells. Look at my defense. Please come save me.
If you care so far about what these conferences have done, East Carolina, their defense didn't look very good while McCall was in there, right? And then when he went out, they got better. Cincinnati, it's hard to really handicap. I thought Louisville was the right side, but Cincinnati had so many guys out, and their coach left, right? So that's kind of a tough one. UCF looked terrible yesterday. Memphis looked fine. I don't know how much we can learn from that. The Pac-12 so far, Oregon State looked great. Washington State did not look great. Obviously, they had a bunch of guys out. I think Tulane's good, and I'm worried about the 2 offensive linemen out for USC. I think under is worth a look here, to be honest. It's like 63 now. I could see this game being a little bit less than optimal. But I mean, does this spread to you say that Caleb Williams was playing? Because I know at that youth event, I guess he said he was playing. I just have a hard time seeing this thing closing less than 3 if we see him out there in warmups. I know no Jordan Addison. I know no Brett Nealand at the center. I know no Voorhees. But you still get the best player in the sport, Caleb Williams. A lot of skill position talent there. I don't know, man. Like, don't you think this closes 3 if he actually plays?
I don't care. I'm taking Tulane either way.
Yeah.
I've seen USC try to tackle.
Yeah, I think
that's true.
This is
Tajay Spears is really.
I was about to say Tajay Spears is going to run for a lot of yards. We talk about Michael Pratt a lot. Yeah, we talk about Michael Pratt a lot, but Spears had 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns on the season. I would not take the under. I think that like Tajay Spears and Caleb Williams, those are touchdowns waiting to happen at any moment. And I believe that Caleb Williams says he's going to play. I believe that Caleb Williams will play, but I could also see it being a situation where like that hammy all of a sudden aggravates. We shut it down. Any very much like even the slightest inconvenience. Fingernail, sorry, shutting it down. Stub your toe, sorry, shutting it down. So we'll see. I don't think that this line is a indicator of whether Caleb Williams will play. I think this line is an indicator of Tulane being able to have success. Tulane being able to have success against the Trojans. Yeah, give me the wave as well. All right, so that's at 1:00. We go multiple screens on January 2nd. Love it. 12 p.m. for ReliaQuest Bowl, Illinois, Mississippi State. 1 p.m. for USC Tulane. And 1 p.m. for the Citrus Bowl, the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, LSU and Purdue. LSU, this thing was around 10. It's danced all the way out to 14.5. Kayshon Boutte is gone. We get an announcement that Kayshon Boutte will not be playing in the bowl game after he announced that he would play in the bowl game and that he was going to be back for 2023. Yay, good news for Brian Kelly. Then all of a sudden he's not going to play in the bowl game, and then Kayshon Boutte announces on Twitter he's off to the NFL draft. So there are still a handful, like literally 4 or 5 very, very talented wide receivers in that LSU wide receiver room. And Boutte himself didn't have the most explosive season or at least especially compared to his 2021 numbers. So do we trust LSU to cover 14.5?
I have no idea. I mean, I think that with all the opt-outs and with everybody out, I still think LSU talent-wise is the much better team in this game, but 14.5 is a lot. But Purdue also does not have its coach. I have no idea. This is a live bet game.
I would still lay it at under 14.5. I'll probably agree with Tom there. And I mean, just to refresh, who's out? We already said O'Connell's out. That's a pretty damn good quarterback. He actually missed a game this year against FAU, and the backup was not good. So that is a significant drop-off. O'Connell is one of the better quarterbacks, I think, in the Big Ten. Drew, the running back, still out. Kobe Lewis, one of the running backs, hit the transfer portal. Charlie Jones opted out. He had like more targets than the entirety of Iowa's offense this year, so that one seems to matter. You have Brock Thompson and Elijah Cannon still out with injury. Payne Durham, their best tight end, opted out. Their best offensive lineman, Spencer Holstage, hit the portal. Greg Hudgens, I think, also is. I think he's not playing. That's one of their D linemen. Corey Trice opted out. I mean, they got a lot of dudes who, like, important players are not playing for Purdue. And they also don't have Jeff Brom. His brother's calling the game, I think it is. So we'll see on that. I just think talent-wise, LSU has too much talent here. Like, LSU has a couple guys out, sure, but their backups are much more talented, I think, than Purdue's backups.
100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. LSU. And finally, the Rose Bowl, 5:00 p.m. Eastern time. Utah favored by 2.5 against Penn State, over under a 52.5. The Utes came up just short in a modern epic against Ohio State last season. Can Cam Rising and Utah get it done here against Penn State?
No. Penn State. Alt line.
Ooh. Are you on that too, bud?
Yeah.
Penn State is a really good team.
This opened like 3.5. I don't get it.
Yeah, like they lost to Michigan and Ohio State, and they got blown out by Michigan, and they were competitive against Ohio State, ended up losing by 13. Like, there was the season opening close win over Purdue, which, by the way, went on to win the Big Ten West, and they blew everybody else out. Like, this is a really good team. I love Utah too. Everybody, we talked plenty about Utah, about how much we like it, but like the Nittany Lions, this is a sneaky, awesome team this year. It was just never in playoff consideration.
I also don't think that Utah runs the ball as well as people think they do.
Correct.
And everybody is like, hey, look how well Michigan ran it on Penn State. I don't think it's the same thing, personally. So I think Penn State can go in there. And I think, honestly, like, Penn State might be more excited to play in this game than Utah is overall.
Yeah, Utah was just here.
Yeah. Like, Clark Phillips is an LA kid, and he's opted out. That's the best corner for Utah. Like, if that doesn't tell you something,
And also, who's betting against Sean Clifford in his final game? Come on.
Kincaid also matters quite a bit. Like, I know they have the tight end who was a big rugby or whatever player, but Kincaid, it's a 16 target or 16 catches, I think it was, in the first game against USC. Like, he matters a heck of a lot.
Penn State 2023 hype train begins in Pasadena. Wait, you rolling your eyes?
I'm just saying.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just thinking, like, we're not going to get any kind of value on them if they smoke Utah.
Especially if, like, Drew Lar comes in the second half and plays really well. It's gonna be like, oh God.
Oh man, that's like you scratch a dog's neck and his foot starts tapping. That's the Penn State fan when Drew Lar's dropping a dime to Parker Washington over a depleted Utah secondary in the Rose Bowl. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
We take Penn State for our best bet here on the Cover 3 podcast. So that's the 2023 hype train a little bit later on. But any final thoughts? What was your last score prediction for the Noles?
I went 42-23.
Oh, that covers the 9.5. Easy. Alt-line season.
Let's go. 2023 hype train for the Seminoles. National champion.
Florida State, Penn State, national title game 2023.
Yeah, if there's any 37 or 37.5 out there team total wise for the Noles, and you guys are still watching us in minute 64 of this show, I don't think those are going to last much longer, personally. Weather here today should be pretty nice. I'm actually here in Orlando for the Under Armour game. I know you probably hate to see this right now, but it's 76. So
it's 50 degrees here. It's nice.
But it feels like 73 with the wind chill. So
are you going to the game?
I am going to go. Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be a tight
are you sitting in the stands or the press box?
I am not sitting.
When are you going to put your paint on?
I'm sitting in A box, but not the press box. So got the local hip-hop here.
When do you start putting on the glitter paint?
Actually, there is glitter on all these chairs. I don't know if they had like a cheerleading convention here or something like that. But like I tucked into this like little like side room here just so I could get away from the big media scrum to do this hour. And like I'm gonna have glitter. Like I tried to pick the chair that had the least glitter and just wipe it off. And there's like,
well, I mean, you're not the first man to go to Florida and get glitter on himself and then have to go explain it to somebody. Oh man, so we will be back on Saturday night. That's right, ring in the new year with the Cover 3 podcast, an instant reaction show to the College Football Playoff Semifinals. Come and join us, youtube.com/cover3. Plan is as close as we can to the end of the Peach Bowl between Georgia and Ohio State. As always, that time's a little bit flexible, and we do encourage you to throw us up on the TV at your local New Year's Eve party or even like a bar or restaurant. Like, put us up on the screen. Forget whatever times this and downtown square. Let's do it with the Cover 3 podcast. We'll be ready for the occasion, and we'll be breaking down the College Football Playoff Semifinals. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See y'all. You got one of the mayo packs?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, we're not off. Okay.
Do you need me to try to end it? The stream?
Yeah, he just texted. He said it's not ending.